The woman stumbled into Sonora, California on a blistering July afternoon in 1878, her dress torn at the hem and her dark hair falling loose from what had once been a proper bun. And when the local deputy asked her name, she pressed her lips together so tightly they turned white and shook her head as though the very syllables might burn her tongue. Owen Sullivan had been shoeing horses outside the livery stable when he first saw her, and something about the way she held herself, proud despite the dust and exhaustion, made him set down his hammer and wipe his hands on his leather apron. He was 26 years old, tall and sun-browned from years of working cattle drives and breaking horses, with dark blonde hair that curled at his collar and gray eyes that had seen enough of the world to recognize when someone was running from something terrible. The deputy, a nervous man named Hargrove, kept pressing her for information, his voice growing louder with each refusal. A small crowd had gathered on the wooden sidewalk outside the general store, their faces a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Owen walked over slowly, his boots kicking up little clouds of dust with each step. "Madam, I need a name for the record," Hargrove insisted, pulling out a small notebook. "We cannot just have strangers wandering into town without proper identification. There are procedures." The woman's jaw tightened, and Owen could see her hands trembling slightly at her sides. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with striking features that spoke of mixed heritage, her skin a warm olive tone and her eyes so dark they were nearly black. There were bruises on her wrists, fading to yellow-green, and a fresh cut above her left eyebrow. "Deputy," Owen said quietly, stepping up beside them. "Maybe the lady needs some water and a chance to rest before the interrogation." Hargrove turned, his mustache bristling with irritation. "This is official business, Sullivan. We have got to maintain order in this town." "Order," Owen repeated, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. "She looks like she has been walking for days. I doubt she is planning to rob the bank." The woman's gaze flickered to Owen, assessing him with a wariness that suggested she had learned not to trust easily. He met her eyes steadily, trying to convey that he meant no harm. "I still need a name," Hargrove insisted stubbornly. The woman opened her mouth, then closed it again. She shook her head once more, and Owen saw something desperate and fierce in her expression, as though her name was the one thing she could control in a world that had stripped everything else away. "Then I'll call you mine until you're ready," Owen said softly, surprising himself as much as anyone else with the words. "Miss Mine, if that suits you better than this public spectacle." A ripple of whispers went through the small crowd. Hargrove sputtered, "That is not how this works, Sullivan. We have laws, regulations. And we also have hospitality," Owen said firmly. "My mother runs the boarding house on 2nd Street. Miss Mine here can stay there, and when she is ready to share her story, I am sure she will. Until then, I will vouch for her. You will vouch for a complete stranger." Hargrove asked incredulously. "I will." The woman looked at Owen with an expression he could not quite read. It was not gratitude exactly, but something more complicated, a mixture of surprise and calculation and the faintest hint of hope. She nodded once, a small, sharp movement. Hargrove threw up his hands in frustration, but ultimately backed down. The crowd dispersed slowly, their gossip already spreading through Sonora like wildfire. Owen gestured down the street, and the woman fell into step beside him, maintaining a careful distance between them. "I am Owen Sullivan," he said as they walked. "Most folks just call me Owen. I work at the livery, break horses, help out with cattle drives when they come through. My mother, Catherine, she runs a respectable boarding house. You will be safe there." The woman said nothing, but her shoulders relaxed slightly. "You do not have to tell me anything," Owen continued, "but you should know that Sonora is a good town mostly. We get prospectors and drifters passing through, but the permanent folks are decent. Some will gossip, but they mean no real harm. They reached the boarding house, a two-story building with a wide front porch and lace curtains in the windows. Catherine Sullivan was sweeping the steps, a sturdy woman in her 50s with graying brown hair and the same gray eyes as her son. She looked up as they approached, and her gaze immediately went to the young woman's bruised wrists and exhausted face. "Owen," she said, her voice warm but questioning. "Ma, this is Miss Mine," Owen said, using the name he had given her. "She needs a room and some kindness. I am vouching for her." Catherine set down her broom and came down the steps, her movements brisk and efficient. "Of course. Come inside, dear. You look like you have not had a proper meal in days." The woman followed Catherine inside, glancing back once at Owen with an expression he could not decipher. He tipped his hat to her and watched them disappear into the house before heading back to the livery. He had horses to finish and work to complete, but his mind kept returning to the mystery woman who refused to speak her name. That evening, as the sun set over the Sierra Nevada foothills and painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Owen returned to the boarding house for supper. His mother set a fine table, and there were usually 4 or 5 boarders in addition to Owen, who kept a room there despite his ability to afford his own place. Tonight, there were the usual faces. Mr. Peterson, who worked at the assay office, the widow Jensen, who was visiting her sister in town, and Tom Bradshaw, a young clerk at the general store. And the woman, sitting at the far end of the table with a plate of food in front of her that she was eating slowly and carefully, as though savoring every bite. She had washed and changed into a simple dress that Catherine must have lent her, a plain calico in pale blue that somehow made her eyes seem even darker. Her hair was braided and coiled at the nape of her neck, and without the dust and exhaustion, Owen could see just how striking she truly was. Catherine served the meal with her usual efficiency, keeping up a gentle stream of conversation that required no response from the silent woman. The other boarders took their cues from Catherine and did not press for information, though Owen caught the widow Jensen stealing curious glances. After supper, Owen helped his mother clear the dishes while the boarders retired to the parlor or their rooms. The woman remained at the table, her hands folded in her lap. "She has not spoken a word," Catherine said quietly to Owen in the kitchen. "Not even to say thank you or yes or no. Just nods and shakes of her head." "Did you see the bruises on her wrists?" Owen asked. "I did. And others on her arms and shoulders. Someone hurt her badly, Owen. Whatever she is running from, it was not good." Owen dried a plate slowly, thinking, "She can stay as long as she needs to." "Of course she can," Catherine agreed. "But that Hargrove will be back asking questions, and if she has a husband or family looking for her, then we will deal with that when it comes," Owen said firmly. His mother gave him a long, searching look. "You are a good man, Owen Sullivan. Just like your father was." Owen's father had died 5 years earlier, thrown from a spooked horse and breaking his neck. The memory still ached, but Owen had learned to carry it. When he went back into the dining room, the woman was still sitting there, staring at her folded hands. Owen pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, not too close, giving her space. "I meant what I said earlier," he told her. "You do not have to tell me anything until you are ready, but I want you to know that you are safe here. My mother will not turn you out, and I will not let anyone hurt you." The woman looked up at him, and for the first time he saw her eyes glisten with unshed tears. She blinked them back fiercely, maintaining her composure, but he could see the emotion there. "If you need anything, just let Ma know," Owen continued. "She is a light sleeper and her room is just down the hall from yours, and I am here most evenings." The woman nodded, then stood abruptly and left the room. Owen heard her footsteps on the stairs, quick and light, and then the sound of a door closing softly. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Owen worked at the livery, breaking a string of wild horses that a rancher had brought in and repairing tack and equipment. The woman, whom everyone in the boarding house had started calling Miss Mine following Owen's lead, helped Catherine with the cooking and cleaning, working with a focused intensity that suggested she was grateful for the distraction. She still did not speak, but she was not sullen or unfriendly. She smiled sometimes, small quiet smiles that transformed her face, and she had a way of communicating with gestures and expressions that was remarkably effective. Owen found himself looking for excuses to be around the boarding house more often. He would come back for lunch, which he had rarely done before, or he would offer to repair things that did not really need repairing. His mother watched this with a knowing expression, but said nothing. On the fourth day after the woman's arrival, Owen was fixing a loose board on the front porch when she came out with a glass of lemonade and handed it to him. He thanked her and drank gratefully, the cool tartness cutting through the afternoon heat. "Hot day," he remarked, setting down the glass. "Feels like it might hit 100 degrees. She nodded, sitting down on the porch steps and looking out at the dusty street. She was wearing another of Catherine's dresses, this one a faded green that brought out the warm tones in her skin. Her hands were never still, always fidgeting with something, and now she was pleating the fabric of her skirt between her fingers. "You know," Owen said conversationally, sitting down beside her but leaving a respectful distance, "when I was a boy, maybe 8 or 9, I got lost in the hills outside of town. I had been chasing after a rabbit and wandered farther than I realized. By the time I understood I was lost, the sun was setting and I had no idea which direction was home." The woman turned her head slightly, listening. "I was terrified," Owen continued. "I thought I would die out there, get eaten by wolves or mountain lions. But then I remembered something my father had told me. He said that when you are lost, the worst thing you can do is panic and run. You have to sit still, get your bearings, and trust that someone will come looking for you." He paused, watching a wagon roll past on the street. "So that is what I did. I found a big rock, sat down, and waited. And sure enough, my father came riding over the ridge just as the moon was rising. He had been searching for hours, but he never gave up." The woman was looking at him now, her dark eyes thoughtful. "I guess what I am saying is that sometimes it is all right to sit still and let someone find you," Owen said quietly. "You do not have to keep running." She held his gaze for a long moment, then looked away. But he saw her throat work as she swallowed, and he knew she had heard him. That night, Owen was walking back from the saloon where he had gone for a single beer and a game of cards with some of the other ranch hands, when he heard raised voices near the hotel. He turned down the side street and saw 3 men standing around a fourth figure, their body language aggressive. As he got closer, he realized the fourth figure was a woman, and his heart kicked hard when he recognized the dark braid and pale blue dress. "What is going on here?" Owen asked sharply, striding forward. The 3 men turned. They were strangers to Owen, rough-looking characters in dusty trail clothes. One of them, a heavy-set man with a black beard, was holding the woman's arm. "None of your business, friend," the bearded man said. "This here is my wife, and she ran off from home. I am just taking her back where she belongs." The woman was shaking her head violently, her eyes wide with fear. She tried to pull free, but the man's grip tightened, and Owen saw her wince. "Let her go," Owen said, his voice level but hard as iron. "Like I said, this is not your concern," the bearded man growled. "I am making it my concern. Let her go." The other 2 men shifted, their hands moving toward their guns. Owen's own revolver was on his hip and he was fast, but 3 against 1 were not good odds. Still, he did not back down. "You do not want to do this," Owen said quietly. "This is a respectable town with a sheriff and laws. Whatever you think your claim is, you will have to prove it legally." "I do not need to prove anything," the bearded man spat. "She is my property." The word property made Owen's blood boil, but he kept his expression neutral. "California law does not recognize human property. Let her go and we can discuss this like civilized people." "To hell with that," one of the other men said, drawing his gun. Everything happened very fast after that. Owen drew and fired in one smooth motion, his bullet hitting the man's gun and sending it flying from his hand with a sharp crack. The man yelped and stumbled back. The bearded man shoved the woman aside and reached for his own weapon, but Owen had already cocked his revolver again and had it trained on the man's chest. "I said let her go," Owen repeated, his voice cold. "Next shot will not be so friendly." "You just made a big mistake," the bearded man snarled, but he slowly raised his hands away from his gun. The third man was helping his companion, who was clutching his stinging hand and cursing. "The only mistake here is yours," Owen said. "Now get out of Sonora. If I see you again, I will not be so polite." The woman had scrambled away and was pressed against the wall of the hotel, her chest heaving. The 3 men backed away slowly, the bearded man's eyes full of hatred. "This is not over," he said. "She is mine and I will get her back." "Try it and you will regret it," Owen promised. The men retreated down the street, their footsteps quick and angry. Owen waited until they were out of sight before lowering his gun and turning to the woman. She was trembling violently, her arms wrapped around herself. "Are you hurt?" Owen asked gently, holstering his weapon and approaching slowly, as he would a frightened horse. She shook her head, but tears were streaming down her face now, the first real emotion she had shown beyond fear and wariness. Owen wanted to reach out and comfort her, but he did not want to frighten her more. "Come on," he said softly. "Let us get you back to the boarding house. You will be safe there." She nodded and pushed away from the wall. They walked back together through the darkened streets, and Owen noticed that she stayed close to him now, as though his presence was a shield. When they reached the boarding house, Catherine was waiting on the porch, her face worried. "I heard gunfire," she said. "Some trouble," Owen said. "Nothing we could not handle, but Miss Mine here needs to rest." Catherine put her arm around the woman's shoulders and guided her inside. Owen followed, his mind working through the implications of what had just happened. If those men truly believed they had a claim on her, they would be back, and next time they might bring the law with them. Later, after the woman had been settled in her room, Catherine made tea and she and Owen sat at the kitchen table, talking in low voices. "Those men called her his wife," Owen said. "They claimed she ran away. Did she?" Catherine asked. "I do not know. But even if she did, you saw those bruises. No woman should have to stay with a man who hurts her." Catherine sighed. "The law may not see it that way, Owen. If they are legally married, he has rights." "Then the law is wrong," Owen said flatly. His mother reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I agree with you, but we need to be careful. If this comes to a legal challenge, we need to be prepared." "I will talk to the sheriff tomorrow," Owen said. "Make sure he knows what is happening." "And the girl?" Catherine asked gently. "What are you going to do about her?" "What do you mean?" "Owen, I have watched you with her. You care about her." Owen was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I do. I do not know why exactly. I just feel like I have to protect her." "Maybe it is more than that," Catherine suggested. "Maybe," Owen admitted. "But she has been through enough. The last thing she needs is me complicating things." "Or maybe," his mother said wisely, "what she needs is someone who will stand by her no matter what." The next morning, Owen went to see Sheriff Marcus Tate, a grizzled veteran of the Mexican-American War who ran Sonora with a fair but firm hand. Owen explained the situation, and Tate listened with a thoughtful expression, his fingers drumming on his desk. "So you shot a man's gun out of his hand," Tate said when Owen finished. "I disarmed someone who was threatening an unarmed woman," Owen corrected. "And you are saying this woman is being held against her will." "I am saying she is terrified and has bruises that suggest abuse. Whatever the legal situation, she needs protection." Tate leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. "The problem is, Sullivan, that if they are married, the law gives him certain rights. I cannot just arrest a man for reclaiming his wife. Even if he is hurting her, even then, unless it is so severe that her life is in danger, and even that can be hard to prove." Tate held up a hand as Owen started to protest. "I am not saying I agree with it. I am just telling you how it is. So what do? You keep her safe until we can figure out the truth. If those men come back causing trouble, I will deal with them. But if they go through legal channels, get a judge involved, then it gets more complicated." Owen left the sheriff's office feeling frustrated and helpless. He went back to the livery and threw himself into work, using the physical labor to burn off his anger. Around noon, Tom Bradshaw came by with a message that Catherine wanted Owen to come home for lunch. When he arrived at the boarding house, he found his mother and the woman in the kitchen. The woman was kneading bread dough, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She looked up when Owen entered, and for the first time she smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes. "Owen," Catherine said, "Miss Mine and I have been talking. Well, I have been talking and she has been listening, but we have come to an understanding." Owen waited, curious. "She wants to stay here in Sonora," Catherine continued. "She wants to work and earn her keep, not just be a charity case. I have agreed to employ her here at the boarding house, give her a wage and a room. If those men come back, we will face that together." Owen looked at the woman, who nodded firmly. There was determination in her face now, a strength that had been hidden under the fear and exhaustion. "That sounds like a good plan," Owen said, "but we should also think about what happens if they do come back with legal papers." Catherine pursed her lips. "Then we will get her a lawyer. There are grounds for divorce even in this territory, especially if abuse can be proven." "We would need her to speak," Owen pointed out gently, "to testify." The woman's hands stilled in the bread dough and her expression shuddered. Catherine shot Owen a warning look. "One step at a time," Catherine said firmly. "For now, she is staying here, and that is that." The weeks that followed were some of the strangest and yet most contented of Owen's life. He fell into a routine of working at the livery during the day and spending his evenings at the boarding house, often sitting on the porch with the woman he still called Miss Mine. She still did not speak, but they developed a comfortable companionship. Owen would talk about his day, about the horses he was training or the people he had seen in town, and she would listen, sometimes nodding or shaking her head, occasionally responding with small gestures that conveyed more than words might have. He learned things about her through observation. She was an excellent cook, with a talent for spices and flavors that suggested a Mexican or Spanish background. She was afraid of loud noises and sudden movements, flinching whenever someone raised their voice or slammed a door. She loved sunrise, often standing on the porch in the early morning light with a cup of coffee, her face tilted toward the sun. She was meticulous and hardworking, never idle, always finding something to clean or mend or improve. And she was beautiful, though Owen tried not to think about that too much. It felt disrespectful to notice her appearance when she was clearly struggling with so much, but he could not help it. The way the light caught in her dark hair, the graceful movement of her hands, the rare smiles that transformed her face, all of it drew him like a moth to flame. The three men did not return, but Owen remained vigilant. He took to carrying his gun more often, and he made sure that someone was always at the boarding house when Catherine and the woman were there. Tom Bradshaw, who had developed a protective attitude toward the mysterious woman, often stopped by after work, and even old Mr. Peterson, the assay office clerk, made a point of being around more. One evening in late August, nearly 6 weeks after the woman's arrival, Owen and she were sitting on the porch as the sun set. The air was cooler now, with a hint of autumn in the breeze. Catherine had gone to visit a friend, and the other boarders were out or in their rooms, leaving Owen and the woman alone. "Do you miss it?" Owen asked quietly. "Wherever you came from." She was silent for a long moment, then shook her head slowly. "Not even a little bit," he pressed gently. She turned to look at him, and he saw such sadness in her eyes that it made his chest ache. Then she shook her head again, more firmly. "I am glad you are here," Owen said. "I know that probably sounds strange given the circumstances, but I am glad." She smiled, one of those rare, genuine smiles, and reached out to touch his hand where it rested on the porch railing. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact, and the touch sent a shock through Owen's system. Her hand was small and warm, her fingers calloused from work but gentle. She squeezed his hand once, then withdrew, but the message was clear. She was glad too. "I have been thinking," Owen continued, emboldened by that small gesture. "If those men do come back with legal papers, we are going to need to know the truth. Not for anyone else, but for us, so we can figure out how to protect you. You do not have to tell everyone, but maybe you could tell me. Just me." She looked away, her jaw tightening in that familiar, stubborn expression. "I promise I will not judge you," Owen said. "And I will not share what you tell me unless you say it is all right, but I cannot help you properly if I do not know what we are dealing with." She was quiet for so long that Owen thought she would refuse, but then, in a voice so soft he almost missed it, she spoke. "Zara." Owen froze. "What?" "My name," she whispered, still not looking at him. "Zara Zavala." He had been waiting 6 weeks to hear her voice, and now that he had, it was like music. Rough from disuse, accented with Spanish inflections, but beautiful. "Zara," he repeated softly. "That is a beautiful name." She turned to him then, and her eyes were bright with tears. "I have not said it aloud in so long. He always called me woman or wife or other things, worse things. He never used my name. It was like I did not exist as a person." "The man with the beard?" Owen asked. She nodded. "Frank Hardesty. He was a foreman at a ranch near Santa Barbara. My father was a vaquero there, one of the best. When I was 17, my father was injured, thrown from a horse, and broke his back. He could not work anymore, and the ranch owner said we had to leave. Frank offered to marry me, to let my parents stay in a small house on the property if I became his wife." Owen felt anger rising in his chest, but forced himself to stay calm and listen. "I said yes because I had no choice," Zara continued, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "My father needed care, and we had nowhere else to go. Frank seemed kind at first, but after we married, everything changed. He was cruel. He would hit me for small things, for anything that displeased him. He said I was his property, that he owned me." "How long were you married?" Owen asked gently. 3 years. 3 years of hell." Zara's hands were shaking, and she clenched them in her lap. "Last month my father died. The infection from his injuries finally took him. My mother had passed 2 years before. With them gone, there was no reason to stay, so I ran. I took what little money I had saved, hidden from Frank, and I ran. And he followed you." "He will not stop," Zara said, her voice breaking. "He is not a man who lets go of what he thinks is his. He will come back, and next time he will have papers, proof of marriage." and the law will give me back to him." Owen reached out and took her hand, holding it firmly. "I will not let that happen. I do not care what the law says. You are not property, Zara. You are a person, and you deserve to be free." She looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. Why do you care?" Owen thought about how to answer that. The truth was complicated, a tangle of protective instinct and growing affection and something deeper that he was not quite ready to name. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because I like having you here. I like talking with you, even when you do not talk back. I like the way you smile when the sun rises, and the way you hum while you cook, and the way you make my mother laugh. I like you, Zara. I like you a great deal." A tear rolled down her cheek, and she did not wipe it away. "I do not know how to be free," she whispered. "I have been owned or controlled my whole life, first by my circumstances, then by Frank. I do not know who I am without someone telling me." "Then we will figure it out together," Owen said. "You can be whoever you want to be, and you can take all the time you need." She smiled through her tears and squeezed his hand. "Mine," she said softly. "You called me yours when we met. Maybe I can call you mine too. I would like that," Owen said, his heart expanding in his chest. They sat together in the gathering darkness, holding hands and not speaking, and Owen felt something shift between them. It was not love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that could become love, given time and patience and care. The next few weeks were transformative. Zara began speaking more, tentatively at first and then with growing confidence. Her voice had a musical quality, and Owen found himself looking for excuses to make her talk just so he could hear it. She told him stories about her childhood in Santa Barbara, about learning to ride horses alongside her father, about her mother's cooking and her grandmother's songs. She told him about the darkness of her marriage too, the painful details that she had kept locked inside for so long. Owen listened to all of it, the good and the bad, and his feelings for her deepened with every conversation. He found himself thinking about her constantly, about the way she tilted her head when she was considering something, about the laugh he was starting to coax out of her more often, about what it would be like to hold her properly, to kiss her. But he held back, knowing that she needed time to heal, to discover who she was without fear. He could be patient. He had waited this long already. In September, the inevitable happened. Frank Hardesty returned to Sonora, and this time he had legal documents with him. He went straight to Sheriff Tate, presenting a marriage certificate and demanding that his wife be returned to him. Tate came to the boarding house personally to deliver the news. Owen, Catherine, and Zara were sitting in the parlor when he arrived, his face grim. "I am sorry," Tate said, looking at Zara, "but he has a legitimate claim. You are legally his wife, and unless you can provide grounds for annulment or divorce, I have to enforce the law." "No," Owen said flatly. "You do not. Sullivan, I do not like it any more than you do, but I have a duty." "Your duty is to protect citizens from harm," Owen argued. "Look at her wrists. Look at the scars. Are you going to send her back to a man who beats her?" Tate's expression was pained. "I cannot just take your word for it. If she is willing to testify, to make a formal complaint and petition for divorce, then we have options, but she has to be willing to speak up." All eyes turned to Zara. She was pale but composed, her hands folded in her lap. "What would I have to do?" she asked quietly. "You would need to go before Judge Morrison, explain the situation, and request a legal separation or divorce on grounds of cruelty," Tate explained. "Morrison is a fair man. If you can prove the abuse, he will likely grant it, but you have to be willing to stand up in court and testify." "And if I do not, then legally I have to return you to your husband." Zara was silent for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she stood up, her posture straight and proud. "I will testify," she said clearly. "I will tell the judge everything. I am not going back to Frank Hardesty." Owen felt a surge of pride and relief. Tate nodded approvingly. "Good. I will arrange for a hearing as soon as possible. In the meantime, you stay here, and Sullivan, you make sure nothing happens to her." "You do not have to tell me twice," Owen said. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the time between, Frank Hardesty made several attempts to approach Zara, but Owen and the other men of Sonora formed an unofficial guard, making sure she was never alone and never vulnerable. The women of the town, too, rallied around her once word of the situation spread. Mrs. Henderson, the banker's wife, visited with offers of support. Miss Abigail, who ran the schoolhouse, stopped by to share her own story of leaving an abusive situation. Even the widow Jensen, who had seemed so prim and judgmental at first, brought over a fresh pie and a fierce promise to testify on Zara's behalf if needed. Owen realized that his small town, which he had sometimes found stifling and boring, was full of good people who would stand up for what was right. The night before the hearing, Owen found Zara sitting alone in the boarding house parlor, staring into the fireplace where a small fire crackled against the autumn chill. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Are you ready?" he asked. "I do not know," she admitted. "I am terrified. What if the judge does not believe me? What if Frank's word carries more weight than mine?" "Then we will figure out another solution," Owen said firmly. "But I think Morrison will believe you. You just have to tell the truth." Zara turned to look at him, and in the firelight her eyes were luminous. "Owen, what happens after? If the judge grants the divorce, what then?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what do I do? Where do I go? I have been surviving week to week, but I have not thought about the future." Owen took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment to be honest. "You stay here, in Sonora. You keep working with my mother, or you find other work if you want. You build a life. Just like that, just like that." He paused, gathering his courage. "And maybe, if you want, you let me be part of that life. Not right away, I know you need time. But eventually, when you are ready, maybe you could consider the possibility of us." Zara's breath caught. "Us? I care about you, Zara. More than I probably should, given everything you have been through. But I cannot help it. I think about you all the time. I want to protect you and make you laugh and see you happy. I want to show you what it is like to be with someone who respects you and values you. I want to court you properly, the way you deserve." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. "You are a good man, Owen Sullivan, the best man I have ever known." "Is that a yes?" he asked, hardly daring to hope. "It is a maybe," she said, but she was smiling. "Ask me again after tomorrow, when I am free." He covered her hand with his own, turning his head to kiss her palm. "I will ask you every day if I have to." The hearing the next day was held in the small courthouse on Main Street. Judge Morrison was a stern-faced man in his 60s with white hair and sharp blue eyes. The courtroom was packed with townspeople, most of them there to support Zara. Frank Hardesty sat on one side with a lawyer he had hired from Sacramento, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. Zara sat on the other side with Owen and Catherine, and though she had no formal legal representation, half the town seemed ready to testify on her behalf. The proceedings were formal and intimidating. Frank's lawyer argued that this was a simple case of a wayward wife who needed to be returned to her husband, that any allegations of abuse were exaggerations or outright lies, that Zara had made vows before God and the law that she was now trying to break. Then, it was Zara's turn to testify. She walked to the witness stand with her head high, and though Owen could see her hands trembling, her voice was steady as she swore to tell the truth. Judge Morrison asked her to explain why she was seeking a divorce. Zara took a deep breath and began to speak, detailing 3 years of systematic abuse. She described the beatings, the cruel words, the isolation from anyone who might help her. She talked about being treated as property, about having no control over her own life, about living in constant fear. Frank's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting she was making things up or exaggerating for sympathy. But then Catherine took the stand and described the bruises and scars she had seen. Tom Bradshaw testified about the night Frank had grabbed Zara on the street. Sheriff Tate confirmed the threats and the violence Owen had prevented. Finally, Owen testified, describing everything he had witnessed and learned. He spoke carefully, sticking to facts but letting his conviction show through. When Frank's lawyer tried to suggest that Owen had ulterior motives, that he wanted Zara for himself and was therefore biased, Owen looked the man straight in the eye and said, "Yes, I care about her. But that does not change the truth of what she has suffered. And if wanting to protect someone from abuse is bias, then I am guilty as charged." The courtroom erupted in murmurs of approval, and Judge Morrison had to call for order. When all the testimony was heard, Morrison took less than 10 minutes to deliberate. He returned to his bench and looked directly at Zara. "Mrs. Hardesty," he said, "the evidence presented here today paints a clear picture of sustained cruelty and abuse. While I do not take the dissolution of marriage lightly, I also cannot in good conscience send a woman back into a dangerous situation. Your petition for divorce is granted on the grounds of cruelty. You are hereby released from all marital obligations to Frank Hardesty." The courtroom exploded in cheers. Zara's face went pale, then flushed with emotion. She swayed slightly, and Owen was there immediately, his arm around her waist to steady her. "You are free," he whispered. "You are free, Zara." She turned to him, tears streaming down her face, and hugged him tightly. He held her, not caring that the whole town was watching, not caring about anything except the feel of her in his arms and the knowledge that she was finally safe. Frank Hardesty stormed out of the courtroom, his lawyer following and trying to talk to him about appeals. But Judge Morrison had made it clear that the divorce was final and legally binding. Frank had lost. That evening, the boarding house hosted an impromptu celebration. Catherine made a feast, and it seemed like half of Sonora stopped by to congratulate Zara and share in her joy. There was music and laughter, and for the first time since Owen had known her, Zara looked truly happy, truly free. Later, when the guests had left and the house was quiet, Owen found Zara on the front porch, looking up at the stars. He joined her and they stood side by side in comfortable silence. "You asked me a question last night," Zara said finally. "About us, about the possibility of us." "I did," Owen confirmed, his heart beating faster. "Ask me again," she said, turning to face him. Owen took both her hands in his, looking into her eyes. "Zara Zavala, would you allow me to court you, to spend time with you and get to know you better and see where this thing between us might lead?" She smiled, a radiant expression that took his breath away. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Owen Sullivan, I would like that very much." He wanted to kiss her, wanted it more than he had ever wanted anything, but he held back, knowing it was too soon, that she needed to set the pace. But Zara, as though reading his mind, reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "You can kiss me," she whispered. "If you want to, I want to," Owen said hoarsely. "God, Zara, I want to." She closed the distance between them, and their lips met in a kiss that was soft and sweet and full of promise. It was nothing like the passion Owen had experienced with other women in his past. It was better, deeper, more meaningful. It tasted like hope and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Zara laughed softly, a sound of pure joy, and Owen pulled her into his arms, just holding her, "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "Thank you for saving me." "You saved yourself," Owen corrected gently. "I just helped a little." "You did more than that. You gave me back my name, my voice, my life. I will never forget that." They stood together under the stars, wrapped in each other's arms, and Owen knew that this was just the beginning of their story. The months that followed were the happiest of Owen's life. He and Zara courted properly, with walks along the river, picnics in the foothills, and long conversations that lasted until dawn. He learned everything about her, from her favorite foods to her dreams for the future. She wanted to open a restaurant someday, she confessed, serving the Mexican dishes her mother and grandmother had taught her. She wanted to own her own business, to be independent and successful on her own terms. Owen supported every dream, every ambition. He helped her save money from her work at the boarding house, and he talked to the banker about what it would take to get a loan for a business. He introduced her to people who could help, and he stood beside her as she navigated the complex world of business ownership as a woman in 1870s California. In December, nearly 6 months after they had started courting, Owen asked Zara to marry him. He did it simply, without fanfare, while they were sitting by the river watching the sunset. He had a ring, a simple gold band that had belonged to his grandmother, and he offered it to her with a trembling hand. "I know you just got free from one marriage," he said, "and I know the idea of being tied to someone again might be frightening. But I promise you, Zara, I will never treat you the way Frank did. I will honor you and respect you and love you every day for the rest of our lives. You will be my partner, not my property. My equal, not my servant. Will you marry me?" Zara took the ring and looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at Owen, and her eyes were shining with tears. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you, Owen Sullivan, because you have shown me what love really is. You have given me freedom and choice and respect. You have never asked me to be anything other than myself. Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. They were married in March of 1879, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Sonora. Catherine cried happy tears, and it seemed like the whole town turned out to celebrate with them. Zara wore a dress she had sewn herself, white with delicate embroidery that echoed the Mexican traditions of her heritage. Owen wore his best suit and thought he had never seen anyone more beautiful than his bride. Judge Morrison, who had presided over Zara's divorce, smiled broadly as he attended the wedding. Sheriff Tate gave Zara away since she had no family of her own, and even Tom Bradshaw served as one of Owen's groomsmen. The reception was held at the boarding house, and Catherine outdid herself with the food. But the real highlight was when Zara unveiled her own contribution, an elaborate Mexican feast that had everyone raving. As Owen watched his new wife laughing and talking with the guests, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the day she had stumbled into town and changed his life forever. Their wedding night was gentle and sweet, with Owen taking care to ensure Zara felt safe and cherished. She had been nervous, the memories of her first marriage still casting shadows, but Owen was patient and loving, and by the end of the night, those shadows had receded, replaced by new memories built on trust and affection. They moved into a small house on the edge of town, a place with 2 bedrooms and a big kitchen that Zara immediately started planning how to use. Owen continued working at the livery, but he also helped Zara with her restaurant plans, and by the fall of 1879, they had secured a small building on Main Street and were preparing to open. Zavala's Kitchen opened in November to immediate success. Zara's cooking drew people from all over the region, and within months, the restaurant was thriving. Owen watched with pride as his wife blossomed, becoming confident and successful in her own right. She was no longer the frightened woman who had refused to speak her name. She was Zara Zavala Sullivan, businesswoman and chef, beloved in the community and respected by all. In the spring of 1880, Zara discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a touch of fear. Zara's own mother had died young, and the memories of that loss still haunted her. But Catherine was there to support them both, and the women of Sonora rallied around Zara with advice and assistance. Their son was born in December of 1880, a healthy baby boy with Owen's gray eyes and Zara's dark hair. They named him Gabriel after Zara's father, and Owen thought his heart might burst from the love he felt holding his son for the first time. "He is perfect," Zara whispered, exhausted but radiant in the bed. "Just perfect. Like his mother," Owen said, kissing her forehead. Gabriel was a happy baby, and his presence brought even more joy to their already happy home. Catherine doted on her grandson, and the restaurant thrived even with Zara taking time to be with the baby. They had hired help by then, and the business was stable enough that Zara could balance motherhood and work. In 1882, their daughter was born, a dark-eyed beauty they named Alina after Zara's mother. With 2 children and a successful business, life was full and busy, but Owen and Zara made sure to carve out time for each other, maintaining the connection that had brought them together. The years passed in a blur of birthdays and holidays and daily joys. Gabriel grew into a smart, curious boy who loved horses as much as his father did. Alina was spirited and determined, with her mother's talent for cooking and her father's stubborn streak. In 1885, they welcomed a 3rd child, another boy they named Thomas, and their family felt complete. Owen expanded his work, eventually buying the livery stable and turning it into one of the most successful businesses in Sonora. Zara's restaurant became famous throughout the Motherlode region, and they eventually opened a 2nd location in a neighboring town. They were prosperous and happy, their lives a testament to what could be built from even the darkest beginnings. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1889, Owen and Zara took a rare evening away from the children, leaving them with Catherine, and rode out to the river where Owen had proposed. They sat together watching the sunset, just as they had a decade earlier, and reflected on everything they had built together. "You ever think about that first day?" Owen asked, his arm around Zara's shoulders. "When you walked into town and refused to tell anyone your name?" Zara laughed, the sound warm and free. "I think about it all the time. I was so scared and so lost. I had no idea what was going to happen to me. And then I called you mine," Owen said with a slight smile. "And then you called me mine," Zara agreed. "I thought you were either crazy or dangerous. But you turned out to be neither. You turned out to be my salvation." "We saved each other," Owen corrected. "You gave me purpose and love and a family. You made me better than I was." Zara turned to kiss him, a long, slow kiss that still made his heart race even after 10 years of marriage. "I love you, Owen Sullivan," she said. "Thank you for giving me back my name. Thank you for giving me my life." "I love you too, Zara, today and always." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. 2 people who had found each other in the most unexpected way and built something beautiful together. Behind them, the lights of Sonora began to glow in the gathering dusk, and ahead of them stretched the rest of their lives, full of promise and possibility. The years continued to unfold with grace and abundance. Gabriel grew into a fine young man who eventually took over the livery from his father, showing the same skill with horses that Owen possessed. Alina married a doctor who had moved to Sonora, and they gave Owen and Zara their first grandchildren. Thomas, the youngest, surprised everyone by becoming a lawyer, determined to fight for justice in the courtroom just as his parents had fought for it in their own lives. Through it all, Owen and Zara remained devoted to each other. They weathered challenges together: economic downturns, illnesses, the inevitable losses that come with age. Catherine passed peacefully in her sleep in 1895, surrounded by her family, and both Owen and Zara mourned the woman who had been mother to them both. But there was more joy than sorrow in their lives. The restaurant continued to thrive, eventually being passed down to Alina, who had inherited her mother's passion for cooking. The livery became a stable and horse trading business that Gabriel expanded into one of the largest in the region. Thomas opened a law practice that specialized in helping women and marginalized people, carrying on his parents' legacy of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. On a warm evening in June of 1910, Owen and Zara sat on the porch of their home, now elderly but still vital, still deeply in love. Their grandchildren played in the yard, and the sound of their laughter filled the air. Zara's hair was silver now, and Owen's face was lined with age, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people they had been when they first met. "Do you remember," Owen said, taking Zara's hand in his, "when I told you that I would call you mine until you were ready to tell me your name?" "I remember," Zara said softly. "It was the first moment I felt hope in years." "I meant it as a temporary thing," Owen continued. "Just until you were ready. But you know what? Even after all these years, even though I know your name and your story and everything about you, you are still mine, and I am still yours." Zara squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with emotion. "Always," she promised. "In this life and whatever comes after. You are mine, Owen Sullivan, and I am yours." They sat together in the fading light, surrounded by the family they had created and the life they had built, two souls who had found each other against all odds and chosen each other every day since. The woman who had once been too afraid to speak her name had become strong and successful, a pillar of her community. The cowboy who had offered his protection to a stranger had found the love of his life. As the sun set over Sonora, painting the sky in those familiar shades of gold and crimson that had witnessed so many moments of their life together, Owen leaned over and kissed his wife gently. Zara kissed him back, and in that kiss was everything they had shared: the fear and the courage, the struggle and the triumph, the pain and the healing, and above all, the deep and abiding love that had sustained them through it all. Their story, which had begun with a woman too traumatized to speak her own name and a cowboy with a kind heart, had become a love story for the ages. It was a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of the human spirit, and the transformative nature of love. They had built a legacy not just in their children and grandchildren, but in the example they set for their community, showing that, even from the darkest circumstances, something beautiful could grow. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Owen and Zara remained on their porch, hands clasped together, still and always each other's, exactly as Owen had promised that first day when he had looked at a frightened stranger and decided to care. The Wild West had been a harsh and unforgiving place, but it had also been the setting for their extraordinary love story, one that would be remembered and retold for generations to come. Their life together had been everything they had hoped for and more. 3 children who had grown into wonderful adults, grandchildren who filled their days with joy, businesses that had prospered and provided for their family and employees alike. But more than any of that, they had each other. The woman who had been afraid to speak her name had found her voice, and the cowboy who had offered his protection had found his heart's home. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not the success or the prosperity, not even the family they had built, but the love they shared. It was a love that had started with a simple act of kindness and had grown into something profound and eternal. It was a love that had survived abuse and legal battles and all the challenges that life could throw at them. It was a love that had only grown stronger with time. Owen and Zara Sullivan lived out their days in Sonora, California, beloved by all who knew them, respected for their integrity and kindness, and cherished by the family they had created together. They left behind a legacy of love and courage that inspired everyone who heard their story. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set over the Sierra Nevada foothills in shades of gold and crimson, the people of Sonora would sometimes see them on their porch, an elderly couple holding hands and watching the sky. Still as devoted to each other as they had been on the day a frightened woman had refused to speak her name, and a kind-hearted cowboy had promised to call her his until she was ready. It was a promise he had kept for more than 30 years, and one he would keep for the rest of his life. They were each other's, completely and forever, exactly as it should be.